The city of Tbilisi looked different from the top floor. From the streets, it was loud, cars moving, people talking, lights flashing in motion. But from Orion Han's penthouse, everything slowed down. The noise faded into a distant hum, like the city existed behind glass. Tonight, the lights were brighter than usual. Inside the penthouse, the air carried a quiet celebration. Not loud music, not laughter, not anything careless. Just controlled conversations, low voices, and the soft clink of glasses. Every person in the room knew exactly where they stood, and more importantly, where Orion Han stood. At the center of it all. He wasn't speaking. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass he hadn't touched. The reflection of the city lights moved across the glass, but his attention wasn't on the view. It never was. People glanced at him without staring. They measured their words when they spoke near him. Even those who had known him for years didn't interrupt his silence unless necessary. That was how Orion operated. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to repeat himself. Decisions made around him carried weight because they came from him. And when he made one, it stayed made. Behind him, someone said quietly, "The expansion is confirmed. All sectors aligned." Another voice followed, careful and respectful. Silent Sting now controls the final corridor. There's no competition left in that region. A brief pause. Then, "Congratulations." Orion gave a small nod, nothing more. For most men, this would have been a moment of visible satisfaction. Years of planning, negotiation, and quiet pressure had led to this point. The kind of achievement that reshaped influence across multiple markets. But Orion didn't celebrate outcomes. He evaluated them. His glass remained untouched. On the table behind him, his phone lit up. No sound at first, just a soft glow on the surface. Then it vibrated once. No one reached for it. No one pointed it out. They all knew better. Orion didn't turn. The phone went still again. The conversations resumed, careful and measured. A few minutes passed. Then it vibrated again. Longer this time. Persistent. Orion's eyes shifted slightly, not toward the phone, but toward the reflection of it in the glass window. The light flickered faintly in the corner of his vision. He watched it for a second. Then looked away. Not now. There were priorities. There were always priorities. Across the room, a man approached slowly, holding a slim black folder. He stopped at a respectful distance. "Sir." Orion turned slightly. The man extended the folder with both hands. "This just came in. Marked urgent." Orion took it without comment. The man stepped back immediately. The phone vibrated again. Orion ignored it. He opened the folder. Inside was a single document. Clean. Structured. Precise. The kind of report designed to remove uncertainty. At the top of the page there was a name. Solvang. His gaze didn't change. No reaction. No pause. Just attention. He read the first line. Then the next. The language was clinical. Direct. No room for interpretation. It detailed a condition. Permanent, irreversible, confirmed through multiple evaluations. At the bottom, the conclusion was stated clearly. Final. Orion didn't blink. Didn't shift. He read it again, slower this time. Not because he doubted it. Because he didn't allow gaps in understanding. Behind him, the room continued as if nothing had changed. Soft voices. Measured movement. A celebration that never crossed into carelessness. The phone vibrated again. This time longer than before. Orion closed the folder. Still no emotion. If anyone in the room had been watching closely, they might have noticed something. Not a reaction but a slight stillness. The kind that came when Orion reached a decision internally. But no one watched that closely. They watched for instructions. He walked to the table. Picked up his phone. For a brief moment the screen was visible. A name. Solvang. The call was still coming through. He looked at it. Not with hesitation. Not with curiosity. Just recognition. The vibration continued in his hand. Then stopped. Miss. The screen dimmed. Orion turned the phone over and placed it face down on the table. The folder remained in his other hand. Across the room, someone stepped forward carefully. "Do you want us to verify the document again?" Orion didn't look at him. "It's already been verified," he said. His voice was calm. Even. That was enough. No one asked a second question. That was another rule in Orion's world. If he said something was confirmed, it was confirmed. He placed the folder back on the table. Aligned it neatly. Everything about him remained controlled. No sudden movements. No visible tension. But the decision had already been made. Not out loud. Not yet. But internally it was complete. The phone lit up again. Another call. Same name. The light reflected faintly against the surface of the table. For a second the room felt quieter. Orion noticed it, not because the sound changed, because his awareness did. He could answer. It would take a second. A simple motion. A simple conversation. But in his world timing mattered. And right now, this wasn't the priority. He turned slightly, addressing the room again. Continue, he said. That was all. The conversations resumed immediately as if nothing had interrupted them. The structure of the evening remained intact. Orion stepped back toward the window. The city lights stretched out in front of him again. Unchanging. Distant. Controlled. Just the way he preferred it. Behind him, the phone stopped vibrating. No new call. No message notification. Just silence. He didn't check it. Didn't turn back. Didn't reconsider. Because in Orion Hahn's world, once something was processed, it moved forward. There was no space for second-guessing. No room for hesitation. Only decisions. And consequences. He stood there for a long moment, looking out at the city that reflected everything he had built. Power. Control. Precision. Everything exactly where it should be. Everything accounted for. Everything. Except the call he chose not to answer. Across the room, someone raised a glass slightly. To silence Sting. Others followed. To silence Sting. Orion didn't turn. Didn't lift his glass. But his presence alone completed the gesture. Because the truth was, they weren't celebrating the network. They were celebrating the man who built it. And that man had just made a decision. Quietly. Without discussion. Without interruption. Without a second question. And somewhere beyond the glass walls of that penthouse, the call that might have changed everything had already stopped. That was the night Orion Hahn made a decision without asking a second question. Orion Hahn did not remember the first time he met Solvayne because of how she looked. He remembered her because she didn't speak when everyone else did. It was a private negotiation in Tbilisi, long before Silent Sting reached its current level of control. The room had been filled with voices, advisors, analysts, representatives, all talking over one another, each trying to push their version of the truth. Orion had been sitting at the head of the table, listening. Not interrupting. Not reacting. Just observing. That was when he noticed her. Not because she stood out, but because she didn't try to. Solvayne sat slightly away from the center of the room, a file open in front of her, pen resting lightly between her fingers. She wasn't involved in the noise. She wasn't adding to it. She was watching. When she finally spoke, the room didn't stop her. It adjusted to her. The clause you're arguing over doesn't mean what you think it means, she said, her voice calm, measured. No emphasis. No attempt to dominate. Just clarity. The man across the table frowned. We've already reviewed that section. She nodded slightly. Then you reviewed it incorrectly. Silence followed, not forced but natural. People turned toward her without being told to. She didn't rush. Didn't fill the silence. She simply turned the document slightly, pointing to a line most had overlooked. In this context, the phrasing removes limitation. Not liability, she explained. If you proceed with this version, you're agreeing to terms you haven't calculated. There was no emotion in her tone. No satisfaction. Just accuracy. Orion watched the shift in the room. The uncertainty. The recalculation. And then, something rare. Respect. Not because she demanded it. Because she earned it in seconds. That was the moment he remembered. Not her face. Not her presence. But her precision. After the meeting ended, Orion didn't approach her immediately. He waited. He observed how she moved through the room, how people interacted with her. She didn't stay for praise. Didn't linger for conversation. She gathered her things and left quietly, as if the entire disruption she caused had been routine. It was. That interested him. He found a reason to speak to her later that evening. Not a direct one. Not obvious. Orion never did anything without intention. She responded the same way she had spoken in the meeting, clear, direct, unaffected by who he was. That interested him more. Their conversations didn't begin with personal questions. They began with disagreements. He would present a position. She would challenge it. Not emotionally. Not defensively. Just accurately. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't try to please him. She corrected him when she believed he was wrong. And she was right often enough to make him listen. That was how it started. Not with attraction. Not with attention. But with understanding. Over time, the space between their conversations changed. It became familiar. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just present. Solvayne didn't ask for anything from him. Not time. Not reassurance. Not explanation. And Orion didn't offer what he didn't believe was necessary. But there were moments, small ones, that built something neither of them defined out loud. She would notice things others didn't. A shift in his tone. A delay in his response. He would adjust things without mentioning it. A detail she once pointed out casually would be corrected days later. There was no announcement. No acknowledgement. Just alignment. For Orion that was enough. For Solvayne it seemed to be as well. Their marriage followed the same pattern. Quiet. Structured. Functional in a way that didn't require constant attention. There were no public displays. No dramatic expressions. But there was presence. And for a long time that was stable. Until the day it wasn't. The kitchen was silent when Orion walked in. Not empty. Just still. Solvayne stood near the counter, a glass of water untouched beside her. She turned slightly when she heard him, her expression unchanged. He didn't greet her. Didn't ask how her day had been. He placed the document on the counter between them. Flat. Precise. Deliberate. Explain this. His voice carried no accusation. Just expectation. Solvayne looked down at the paper. Her name was at the top. The content below it was detailed, clinical, and final. She picked it up. Read it once. Then again. Carefully. There was no immediate reaction. No visible confusion. No rush to respond. She set the paper back down. This isn't mine, she said. Orion's gaze didn't shift. It has your name on it. She looked at him directly now. Then the name is the only part that's accurate. Still calm. Still controlled. There was no defensiveness in her tone. Just certainty. Orion didn't move. I had it verified. The words landed without force. But they carried weight. Solvayne held his gaze for a moment. Not searching. Not questioning. Just observing. Then something in her expression changed. Not dramatically. Not visibly to anyone who wasn't paying attention. But Orion noticed. Because he noticed everything. It wasn't hurt. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. A quiet understanding forming in real time. Not about the document. About him. She glanced down at the paper again, then back at him. You believe this, she said. It wasn't a question. Orion didn't answer. He didn't need to. She nodded once. Slowly. Again, not in agreement. In acceptance. The room remained quiet. No raised voices. No emotional escalation. Just two people standing on opposite sides of something that had already shifted. Solvayne didn't try to convince him further. Didn't argue. Didn't explain again. Because she understood something clearly now. It wasn't about evidence. It wasn't about proof. It was about trust. And in that moment, it wasn't there. She reached for the paper, folded it once and placed it back on the counter. Neatly. Aligned. Just like he would have done. Orion watched her. Waiting. Not for emotion. For resolution. She met his gaze one last time. Not distant. Not cold. Just final. Nothing else needed to be said. Because anything she could say now would not change what had already been decided. And she knew it. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, not heavy, just complete. A conversation that had already ended without continuing. She turned away first. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just a simple movement. And in that movement something closed. Orion remained where he was. Still. Composed. Certain. Because from his perspective the situation was clear. The information had been presented. The response had been given. The conclusion had been reached. There was nothing more to process. But Solvayne understood it differently. Not as a conclusion. As a realization. She didn't leave that night. She didn't pack immediately. She didn't create a scene. Everything remained quiet. Normal on the surface. But the structure underneath had already shifted. By the time Orion noticed the absence, it was already complete. No confrontation. No final conversation. No attempt to reopen what had been closed. Just space where something used to be. And no indication that it would return. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself again. She just chose not to stay where she wasn't believed. Time did not pause after Solvayne left. It adjusted. For Orion Hahn, adjustment meant expansion. The absence of distraction created space, and Orion used space the only way he knew how. He filled it with control. Silent sting grew faster in the months that followed. What had once been a network became a structure. What had once been influence became authority. Markets that had resisted quietly aligned. Competitors who had stood firm began to shift, then disappear from key positions. Nothing about it was loud. No announcements. No visible conflict. Just movement. Calculated, precise, and final. Orion oversaw everything personally. He reviewed reports late into the night, held meetings that rarely extended beyond necessary words, and made decisions that others executed without question. His standards didn't change. If anything, they sharpened. There was no hesitation in him. No visible reflection. Whatever had happened before, it didn't interrupt his trajectory. From the outside, his life appeared complete. Every detail aligned. Every outcome controlled. But internally, something had changed in a way that didn't present itself clearly. It wasn't distraction. It wasn't doubt. It was something quieter. A space where something used to exist, now replaced by efficiency. He noticed it only in moments that had no purpose. Moments he usually didn't allow. So he reduced them, filled his schedule, eliminated idle time, and continued forward. People surrounded him constantly. Advisors, executives, partners. Each one aware of his expectations. Each one careful with their words. Respect was present. So was distance. No one stepped beyond what was required. No one assumed familiarity. That was how Orion preferred it. And that was exactly what he maintained. The woman who appeared beside him months later fit seamlessly into that structure. She was composed, sure, strategic in her thinking and controlled in her presence. She understood how to operate in Orion's world without needing explanation. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. Didn't seek emotional validation. Didn't disrupt his pace. To anyone observing from a distance, she looked like a perfect match. Balanced, efficient, appropriate. But there was something missing. Not obvious. Not measurable. Just absence. She didn't challenge him. Not because she couldn't. Because she chose not to. She aligned instead. And Orion allowed it. Because alignment required less attention. Less energy. Less adjustment. Everything around him became easier. Smoother. More predictable. And yet, not once did he confuse that with something meaningful. He didn't think about Solvayne directly. He didn't revisit conversations or question outcomes. That wasn't how he functioned. But sometimes, in the middle of a discussion, he would pause, not visibly, not long enough for anyone to notice, and realize something small. No one in the room corrected him anymore. No one interrupted his conclusions. No one pointed out the one detail others overlooked. The room agreed with him. Always. And that was efficient. But it wasn't the same. He didn't dwell on it. He moved forward. Because that was what he had always done. Across the city, life moved differently. Not in the glass towers or controlled environments Orion operated in, but in a quieter district where movement was less structured, more human. Solvayne didn't choose isolation. She chose distance. There was a difference. Her space was simple, clean, organized without excess. Everything had a place and everything served a purpose. Her morning started early. Not because she had to. Because she preferred control over her time. There was a routine. Not rigid, but consistent. She woke before the city fully came alive. Prepared what she needed for the day. Checked her schedule. Adjusted where necessary. Every decision she made was deliberate. Nothing rushed. Nothing reactive. There was no trace of the life she had left behind in how she moved now. No hesitation. No looking back. Whatever had been closed remained closed. Her work was precise. It required focus, attention, and clarity. The same qualities that had defined her before. But now there was something added to it. Ownership. Every outcome belonged to her. Every decision carried only her weight. And she handled it without difficulty. Because she had already made the hardest decision. Everything after that was simpler. The apartment was quiet most of the time. But not always. There were moments, small ones, where the silence shifted. Not disrupted. Just changed. A second voice. Then another. Brief. Light. Then gone again. Solvayne moved through those moments the same way she moved through everything else. With calm. With control. Without making them larger than they needed to be. She didn't explain them. Didn't define them. They existed. That was enough. Her evenings followed a pattern as well. Work completed. Environment reset. Time accounted for. She didn't fill her space with noise. She didn't need to. There was a steadiness in her life now that didn't rely on anything external. No expectation. No uncertainty. Just structure. And choice. Everything she did was chosen. That was the difference. Not once did she check for anything she had left behind. Not once did she revisit a decision she had already made, because she understood something clearly. Once trust was removed, nothing else rebuilt it. Not time. Not explanation. Not presence. And she had no interest in testing that truth. So she didn't. In another part of the city, Orion stood in a room filled with people who waited for him to speak. A decision was needed. Numbers had been presented. Risks outlined. Outcomes predicted. He listened, then gave his answer. Short. Final. The room adjusted immediately. Plans shifted. Movement began. Everything aligned around his decision. As it always did. He didn't stay longer than necessary. Didn't engage in extended discussion. He left the room the moment his presence was no longer required. Efficiency. Always. As he stepped into the corridor, someone fell into step beside him. The woman who had become a consistent presence in his environment. She spoke briefly, updating him on the next schedule. He listened. Nodded once. Nothing more. There was no pause. No deviation. Just movement from one controlled space to the next. From one decision to another. Everything progressing exactly as it should. And yet, the space remained. Unacknowledged. Unresolved. Untouched. That evening, in a quieter part of the city, Solvane closed the door behind her. The day had ended. The structure remained intact. Nothing out of place. Nothing unfinished. She moved through her space with the same calm precision she carried everywhere. And in that space, the life she had built continued. Not loudly. Not visibly to the world Orion operated in. But fully. Completely. And without him. The city of Tbilisi held both realities at once. Power and quiet. Control and independence. Two lives moving forward in the same place. But no longer intersecting. Not by chance. Not by design. Because one had chosen certainty. And the other had chosen absence. While Orion built an empire that touched the world, Solvane built a life he no longer had access to. The invitation had been selective. Not because access was difficult, but because presence was controlled. The rooftop sat above one of the most exclusive buildings in Tbilisi, a place designed for people who preferred distance over attention. The lighting was soft, the atmosphere deliberate, and every table arranged to create privacy without isolation. Orion Han arrived exactly on time. Not early. Not late. Timing for him was never accidental. As he stepped out onto the rooftop, the city stretched beneath him, dimmed just enough by the height to feel separate from everything below. Conversations moved in low tones. Glasses reflected light without drawing focus. Nothing disrupted the balance of the space. This was the kind of environment Orion preferred. Structured. Contained. Predictable. He moved through the space without hesitation, acknowledging a few individuals with brief nods. No extended greetings. No unnecessary exchanges. His presence was already understood. A table had been prepared for him near the edge of the rooftop. From there, the view was uninterrupted. He sat, placed his phone on the table and adjusted his cuffs slightly. Everything in order. A server approached, offered a quiet greeting and placed a glass in front of him. Orion acknowledged it without speaking. Around him, the evening continued. Measured. Refined. Controlled. And then, something shifted. Not in the environment. In his attention. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't movement. It was recognition. Orion's gaze moved across the room, not quickly, not searching, just adjusting. And then it stopped. Near the far side of the rooftop, positioned slightly away from the main arrangement of tables, was a smaller section designed for privacy. That was where she sat. Solvane. There was no confusion. No hesitation in recognition. She hadn't changed in any way that mattered. Her posture was the same, straight, composed, completely at ease in her space. Her expression carried no distraction, no awareness of the room around her beyond what was necessary. She wasn't performing. She wasn't reacting. She was simply present. Across from her, two boys, young, close in age. Their voices carried lightly across the space. Not loud, not disruptive, just active in the way children naturally are when they feel comfortable. One of them leaned forward slightly, speaking with focused intensity. "That doesn't make sense," he said. The other responded immediately. "It does if you think about it properly." Solvane listened. Not interrupting. Not correcting. Just allowing the exchange to unfold. There was something deliberate in the way she observed them. Calm, attentive, without control. Orion didn't move. Didn't look away. His attention narrowed. Details began to align. Not emotionally. Not reactively. Just analytically. The structure of their features. The way they held themselves. The tone in their voices. Familiar in a way that didn't require explanation. One of the boys turned slightly, reaching for something on the table. That was when his gaze lifted. And landed directly on Orion. There was no hesitation in the look. No uncertainty. Just observation. The boy studied him for a second. Long enough to notice, short enough to remain natural. Then his expression shifted slightly. Not in recognition. In comparison. He leaned back in his chair, still looking. Then spoke clearly enough to carry across the space. Why does he look like us? The question wasn't loud. But it didn't need to be. It cut through the environment without force. The second boy paused, turning his head to follow the first one's gaze. His eyes moved to Orion. Held there. Assessing. The same way. Not confused. Not alarmed. Just processing. Solvayne didn't move immediately. For a brief moment she remained exactly as she had been, still, composed, untouched by the shift. Then, slowly she followed their line of sight. Her gaze found Orion. And stayed there. There was no shock in her expression. No visible reaction. No attempt to look away. Just recognition. Complete and controlled. The space between them held. Not filled with tension. Not filled with emotion. Just awareness. Orion stood. The movement was quiet. Measured. No urgency. No hesitation. He didn't approach immediately. He didn't call out. He simply adjusted his position, stepping away from his table, his attention still fixed. The environment around them continued. Conversations resumed. Glasses lifted. Nothing outwardly disrupted. But within that space, something had already changed. Orion moved closer. Each step deliberate. Each moment extending the distance between what he had known and what he was beginning to understand. As he approached, details sharpened. The structure of the boys' faces. The lines in their expressions. Subtle. But precise. Time adjusted in his mind. Dates. Decisions. Moments he had processed without question. They aligned now in a way they hadn't before. Not with confusion. With clarity. The kind that didn't require confirmation. He stopped a few steps away from the table. Close enough to see. Not close enough to interrupt. The boys watched him. Unmoved. Curious but not uncertain. Solvayne held his gaze. Unchanged. No anger. No warmth. No invitation. Just finality. Orion didn't speak. Because there was nothing to ask. Not here. Not like this. The answer was already forming. Not given to him. Revealed through what he saw. The boys didn't shift under his attention. They didn't look to Solvayne for direction. They remained exactly as they were, present, composed in their own way, unaffected by the weight of the moment that Orion carried. The question still lingered. Unanswered. But no longer necessary. Because Orion wasn't searching for confirmation. He was recognizing truth. The kind that didn't depend on words. The kind that couldn't be denied once seen. Solvayne broke the silence first, not with speech but with action. She turned slightly toward the boys. Finish your meal, she said calmly. Her voice was steady. Unchanged. As if nothing had shifted. As if the moment held no more weight than any other. The boys obeyed without question. Their attention returned to the table. Conversation resumed between them, quieter now but still natural. Orion remained where he stood. Not dismissed. Not acknowledged further. Just outside. And that was when it settled. Not as a realization that struck suddenly. But as something that locked into place. Every detail. Every absence. Every decision. Reframed. He hadn't missed something. He had chosen not to see it. And now, he was seeing everything at once. Solvayne looked at him one final time. The same expression. Unchanged. There was no need for explanation. No need for confrontation. Because nothing in this moment was uncertain. Nothing required discussion. Everything that mattered was already clear. Orion stepped back. Not abruptly. Not in retreat. Just enough to create distance. Not from them. From the moment. Because there was nothing he could do within it. Not here. Not now. The rooftop remained the same. The city lights still stretched endlessly below. The controlled environment held its structure. But for Orion, nothing was aligned the way it had been when he arrived. The balance had shifted. Irreversibly. He turned. Walked away from the table. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just with certainty. But not the same certainty he had walked in with. Something deeper. Something heavier. Something he hadn't accounted for. Behind him, Solvayne didn't look back. The boys continued their conversation. Their world remained intact, complete, without interruption, without need, without him. And for the first time in a long time, Orion understood exactly where he stood. Not at the center. Not in control. Not even relevant. Just outside. Looking in. In that moment, Orion realized he hadn't been replaced. He had been erased. Orion Hahn did not react immediately. That was the first difference. In the past, he would have moved the moment something didn't align. He would have called the right people, issued instructions, and watched the structure around him adjust in real time. But this time, he waited. Not out of hesitation. Out of control. He returned to his penthouse without changing his pace. The city looked the same as it always did. Lights steady, distant, untouched by what had shifted inside him. Nothing externally had changed. Everything internally had. He set his phone down on the table. Didn't check it. Didn't call anyone. Didn't speak. He stood there for a moment, looking out across the glass, not at the city, but through it. Then he turned, walked to his desk, and opened a drawer he rarely used. Inside were files, physical, not digital. Documents he kept separate from the systems everyone else had access to. Information he didn't share, didn't delegate, didn't expose. He pulled one out, blank, untouched, placed it on the desk, sat down, and began. Not with assumptions, with questions. The report. That was where everything began. He didn't revisit the conclusion. He revisited the origin. Who processed it? Who verified it? Who delivered it? Each layer mattered. Each step had to be accounted for. Orion didn't use his standard channels. That was the second difference. Silent Sting operated on precision. Its network was structured so that information moved efficiently, cleanly, and without unnecessary interference. But this time, he didn't trust efficiency. He trusted distance. He reached out to a contact who did not report directly into his structure. Someone external. Someone who operated parallel, not within. The request was simple. Trace the document. Not the content. The path. Where it was generated. Who handled it. How it was confirmed. No names attached to Orion. No indication of interest. Just a quiet inquiry. The response didn't come immediately. Orion didn't expect it to. He continued his routine. Meetings. Decisions. Movement. From the outside, nothing shifted. His presence remained the same. Controlled. Precise. Unchanged. But internally, everything was under review. Every assumption. Every process. Every point of trust. Days passed. Then the first result came in. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't framed as a revelation. Just a detail. The originating clinic listed on the report had no record of Solvang. Not incomplete. Not missing. Non-existent. Orion read the line twice. No reaction. Just confirmation. He set the document down. Then continued. The next layer. Verification. Who approved it? Who confirmed its validity? That took longer. Because verification in his system was designed to be reliable, trusted, untouched by error. That was the expectation. But expectations were built on systems. And systems could be adjusted. The response came late at night. Concise. Direct. The verification had not been independent. It had passed through an internal channel. Flagged as already confirmed before final review. Orion leaned back slightly in his chair. Not in surprise. In understanding. The structure hadn't failed. It had been redirected. He didn't stop there. He moved deeper. Tracing the chain. Who handled the document before it reached him? Who had access? Who had influence? The names began to align. Not randomly. Not loosely. Deliberately. Each connection led to the next with a precision that mirrored his own methods. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was design. Someone had constructed a path. Controlled every step. Ensured the outcome. And placed the final result in his hands. Knowing exactly how he would respond. Orion stood. Walked to the window. The city remained unchanged. But now it looked different. Not because of what it was. Because of what he understood. He had built a system that valued certainty, efficiency, verification. And someone had used those exact principles. Against him. Not by breaking them. By following them. That was what made it effective. He returned to the desk. Sat down again. And reviewed everything once more. Not for information. For clarity. The conclusion was simple. The report had been fabricated. The verification had been controlled. The process had been manipulated from within. And he had accepted it. Not because he was careless. Because he trusted the structure he built. That was the point. That was where the design succeeded. Orion didn't feel anger. He didn't reach for retaliation. He didn't move to remove anyone immediately. Because none of that addressed the core issue. The lie was precise, carefully executed. But it only worked because he allowed it to. He didn't question it. He didn't pause. He didn't look beyond what was presented. That was the part that mattered. Not the manipulation. His acceptance of it. He closed the file. Slowly. Deliberately. Then placed it back into the drawer. Not hidden. Not dismissed. Just acknowledged. The room was silent. No movement. No interruption. For the first time in years, Orion didn't move to the next step. He didn't issue orders. He didn't restructure anything. He didn't act. Because action for him had always followed clarity. And now, clarity required something different. Not strategy. Not control. Understanding. He stood again. Walked back to the window. Looked out at the city that had always reflected his decisions. Everything he had built was still intact. Every system still functioning. Every structure still aligned. But for the first time, he saw the gap. Not in the system. In himself. He had always believed that control came from eliminating uncertainty. From verifying every detail. From trusting only what could be confirmed. But he had missed something. Something that couldn't be measured. Something that didn't appear in reports. Trust. Not in the system. In the person standing in front of him. Solvayne had told him directly. Come. Certain. Without hesitation. And he had chosen the document instead. Not because it was stronger. Because it was easier. It required less. Less thought. Less risk. Less responsibility. And that choice had cost him everything that came after. Orion exhaled slowly. Not in frustration. In acknowledgement. There was no immediate solution to this. No clear correction. No action that reversed what had been done. Because this wasn't a problem of structure. It was a problem of decision. And that couldn't be undone. Only understood. The city lights reflected back at him through the glass. Unchanged. Steady. Indifferent. Just like they had always been. But Orion wasn't looking at them the same way anymore. Because now, he wasn't evaluating the world around him. He was evaluating himself. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't move forward immediately. He stayed where he was. In the space between realization and action. Where no one else could guide him. Where no system could decide for him. Where the only thing left was truth. For the first time in years, Orion Hahn didn't plan his next move. He questioned the man who made the last one. Orion Hahn did not arrive unannounced. He didn't believe in sudden appearances. Everything he did carried intention even now. The building was quieter than the places he usually occupied. No polished lobby filled with controlled movement. No staff adjusting their posture when he entered. Just a simple entrance, a hallway that didn't try to impress, and a space that belonged entirely to the people inside it. He stood outside the door for a moment. Not hesitating. Not uncertain. Just present. Then he knocked. Once. Clear. Measured. No urgency behind it. A few seconds passed. Footsteps approached from the other side. The door opened. Solvayne stood there. She looked exactly as she had the last time he saw her. Composed. Still. Unmoved by his presence. There was no surprise in her expression. No question. She had expected this. Or at least she had prepared for the possibility. Orion didn't speak immediately. Neither did she. The space between them held the same quiet clarity it always had. Then she stepped aside. Not an invitation. Not a welcome. Just an acknowledgement. He entered. The apartment was structured the way everything in her life was. Clean, intentional, without excess. Nothing out of place. Nothing unnecessary. But it wasn't empty. There was life in it. Not visible in decoration. Visible in presence. From another room, faint voices carried. Light. Uncontrolled. Natural. Orion's attention shifted for a second, then returned. Solvayne closed the door behind him. He turned to face her fully. I know what happened, he said. His voice was even. No weight added. No emotion forced. Just statement. Solvayne didn't respond immediately. She walked past him toward the center of the room, then turned to face him again. Her posture remained the same. Relaxed but not open. Present but not engaged. I reviewed the report, he continued. It wasn't real. She watched him. Silent. I traced the process. It was structured to reach me as confirmed information. Still no interruption. No reaction. Just attention. I didn't question it, he said. That was the only part of his statement that shifted slightly. Not in tone. In meaning. Solvayne held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once. Not in agreement. In acknowledgement. I know, she said. 2 words. Simple. Complete. She didn't ask for details. Didn't ask for names. Didn't ask how it happened. Because none of that changed what mattered. Orion understood that. I'm not here to explain it further, he said. She nodded again. I know. The silence returned. But this time it wasn't empty. It was defined. Everything that needed to be said about the past had already been said. Or didn't need to be. Orion didn't move closer. Didn't attempt to reduce the distance between them. Because he understood something clearly now. Distance in this space wasn't physical. It was structural. Built. Maintained. And not his to remove. From the other room a voice called out. Mama? Solvayne turned slightly. I'm here, she replied calmly. The voice didn't follow immediately. Just a pause. Then quiet again. She turned back to Orion. He held her gaze. There was no request in it. No expectation. Just intent. I'm not here to change anything, he said. She didn't react. I'm not here to rebuild what was there. Her expression remained steady. I'm here to be present, he continued. For them. That was the first time the focus shifted fully. Not to her. To something beyond her. Solvayne watched him closely now. Not for emotion. For consistency. For alignment between what he said and how he said it. You don't get to decide that alone, she said. Her voice was calm. Clear. No resistance. No softness. Just boundary. I know, Orion replied. No hesitation. No pushback. Another pause. Solvayne studied him. Not as someone she needed to understand. But as someone she needed to assess. Then she turned slightly toward the hallway. You can come out, she said. A moment later, movement. 2 small figures appeared at the edge of the doorway. They didn't rush forward. They didn't hide. They stood there. Looking. Observing. The same way they had the first time. Orion didn't step toward them. Didn't speak immediately. He waited. Because this wasn't his space to enter. Not without permission. One of the boys shifted slightly. You came back, he said. Orion nodded once. Yes. The other watched him closely. Not speaking. Measuring. There was no fear in either of them. No confusion. Just awareness. Solvayne remained where she was. Not guiding. Not interfering. Just present. The boys moved a little closer. Slowly. Not cautious. Just deliberate. Orion adjusted his posture slightly. Lower. Not imposing. Not distant. Just accessible. What are you doing here? One of them asked. To see you, Orion said. Simple. Direct. No added weight. The boys exchanged a glance. Brief. Then looked back at him. Why? The other asked. Orion didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't have one. Because he chose it carefully. Because I should have been here before, he said. No explanation beyond that. No justification. Just acknowledgement. The boys didn't respond right away. They processed. In their own way. Then one of them shrugged slightly. Okay, he said. Not acceptance. Not rejection. Just continuation. They turned, moving back toward the room they had come from. Not dismissing him. Not inviting him. Just returning to what they were doing. Orion remained where he was. Still. Waiting. Solvayne watched the entire exchange. Her expression hadn't changed. But her attention had. Focused. Precise. Evaluating. You don't get access all at once, she said. Orion nodded. I understand. You don't interrupt their structure. I won't. You don't disappear once you start. I won't. Each statement was clear. Each response immediate. No hesitation. No negotiation. Just agreement. Because he understood the terms. Not as conditions to challenge. As boundaries to respect. Solvayne held his gaze for one final moment. Then turned toward the hallway. Dinner is in 10 minutes, she said. Her voice carried lightly into the other room. Okay, one of the boys replied. Orion didn't move. Didn't assume. Didn't step forward. He waited. Solvayne glanced back at him briefly. Not inviting. Not stopping him. Just allowing. That was enough. He followed. Not ahead. Not beside. Behind. The table was already set. Simple. Structured. Everything in place. The boys sat where they had been sitting before. Solvayne moved naturally through the space. Orion remained still for a second, then adjusted. He took a seat. Not at the head. Not at the center. Just where there was space. The boys watched him briefly, then returned to what they were doing. Conversation resumed. Light. Unfiltered. At one point, one of them pushed something toward him. Can you fix this? He asked. Orion looked down. It wasn't complicated, but it wasn't familiar either. He adjusted it once. Then again. Not perfectly. The boy watched, then corrected him. Without hesitation. Without concern. Orion listened. Adjusted again. This time correctly. The boy nodded slightly. Better? Orion gave a small nod in return. Thank you. The interaction was simple. Small. But it held more weight than anything else that had happened that day. Solvayne stood at the edge of the room. Watching. Not with emotion. Not with distance. With attention. Every movement. Every response. Every detail. She wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for consistency. And Orion understood that. Because for the first time, he wasn't trying to control the outcome. He was participating in the process. Later, as the evening settled, Orion stood near the door again. Not lingering. Not waiting for something more. Just ready to leave. Solvayne stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. You understand what this is, she said. Yes. You don't get to define it. I won't. A brief pause. Then she nodded once. Acknowledgement. Nothing more. Orion opened the door. Stepped out. And for the first time in a long time, he left without certainty. But not without direction. Because this time, he wasn't moving toward control. He was moving toward something that required more time, consistency, and the willingness to be seen differently. Not by the world, but by the only people it mattered to now. The door closed behind him. And inside, life continued. Uninterrupted. Structured. Oh, he didn't get a second chance at love. He got something harder, time to prove he deserved to be remembered differently. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting videos.